Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and macabre. And your hosts are me, Bob Dale.
And me, Ali Downey.
Fucking done that so many times, Al.
I know, and I heard the stumble.
How do I fuck it up? I literally wrote it, and I think I've said it like 200 times.
At least.
Plus the ones that we fucked up the recordings of, so I've done those as well. Anyway, are you well, sir? How are you?
I'm fabulous.
You've had an exciting day.
I've had a really exciting day.
Share with us.
I was up in Perth.
Which is exciting in itself.
Exciting in itself. It's a beautiful city. But no, I was up in Perth at the registrar's office, registering my intent to wed.
Woo!
Woo!
Congratulations. My favourite part of that story was when Sarah got here tonight. I think probably the first thing she said to me was, they didn't even ask me the fucking questions. I know his date of birth backwards and all shit. So at some point this evening, I'm going to quiz her.
Nice. She'll get it all right.
I have said we are such a welcoming nation for people down south normally, so it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Thumbs up.
But your quiz is coming. You better be prepped. We've not recorded in person in a while, Alistair.
No, it's been at least like 3 or 4 weeks.
It's been a good wee while. We did see each other at CrimeCon, obviously.
Yeah, we did. Which was great.
It was good fun, actually. I was, and I'll not make no bones about it, I was a bit like, ugh, I was absolutely done in, knackered going to it. But it was a really good day, mainly because they thought I stayed there, so they let me drink from the bar quite early. But no, it was a really good day. We met some new podcasts.
Yep, we did.
Which always makes us happy. We had an evening and a day with David Swindle, which, I mean, if you don't enjoy that, who are you?
Yeah, lovely man.
And we got to see the Kirsty Maxwell appeal and Victims Abroad guys again, who we are very proud to support, I think. They are very good friends of the podcast. So if you don't know about the Kirsty Maxwell appeal and the Victims Abroad guys, please do look them up because... yeah, good friends of the podcast, I would say.
And a fantastically worthwhile cause.
And then I got the pleasure of interviewing the captain from True Crime Garage in the evening.
You did. You were loving it.
I was loving it. Do you know that way, Willie? And I've been quite open about this. I listened to True Crime Garage for years and years and years, and I was a fan. And I was worried about things. I think I carried myself all right.
Oh, the banter was great.
And afterwards, my first check-in was it all right? And you were like, yeah, man, it was cool. That's fine. So that I don't need any other praise than if you'd gone, that was dog shit, dude. And I maybe not released it, I think would have been the thing there. So we had a good time at CrimeCon. But you're up here for a few times?
Oh yeah, I'm up here 3 times this month. Or for 2 weeks and then for another week later in the month as well, because Sarah's going to be picking up her wedding dress.
Yeah. And I find that strange you're going with her, but, you know, each to their own.
They get free mimosas.
Is that the reason you're going?
Yeah.
Nice, I like
They
it.
They gave me free mimosas in the bridal shop.
Like, I'm not missing out on that.
It's amazing.
Fuck with tradition. Let's get a mimosa.
Yeah.
You should get that tattooed one day.
I don't. I will.
I know. And it'll say Smythes or something instead. You're welcome.
You still love them, don't you?
Oh, it's one of it is literally my favorite part of your body.
Yeah. Everybody loves the Smythes tattoo.
We'll not do a whip round to see if anybody else has got a favorite part. We'll move swiftly on. We are here because we deliberately made a point of trying to record in person the Teacup Poisoner episodes.
Yes.
Because you specifically wanted to do them in person because you thought it was such an important tale to tell.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I think that we've gotten to over... I mean, we got over 2 episodes. I think we've only ever done a double episode before.
Yeah.
I can remember. This is number 4?
Yeah, this is the 4th part in the Teacup trilogy.
Yeah. Is it the last one?
It is the concluding part of the Teacup trilogy.
It's the concluding. You've gone full fucking Douglas Adams on us on this. That's what's happened here.
I went down a hole.
Yeah, the farthest I've ever seen you go down a hole.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to ask you at the end, because we'll not do it now because we'll get into the tale of the evening. Why this one that has, because of all the tales you've told, which I know you enjoy the research for and the reading for, why is this one the one that's gone, I need some more?
All right. Yeah, we'll answer that at the end.
Oh, he's fucking got it prepped and everything. Look at that. Professional podcast, everybody.
He says drinking some tenants.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've been drinking all day as well, so
I have.
we might be in
I've
trouble.
had some grasshoppers.
Are they the minty nonsense?
That's the minty green greatness.
I'm not all right with it.
It's fantastic.
It looks horrible and it doesn't sound great.
It tastes like mint Aero ice cream.
Which is literally my worst dessert. I'd much rather have a Viennetta.
Oh, 80s.
Is that 80? I'd go 90s. We digress. Stick on Facebook what your favorite dessert from the 90s was.
We'd like to know.
I'm
Inquiring minds want to know.
genuinely interested.
Right, yeah, but this is the concluding part of the Teacup trilogy in 4 parts. Finally.
Here, I'm the one that has to sit here and listen to all of it.
I know. And it's been in all of it. It's been the long story of the life of the man who would become known as one of Great Britain's most prolific killers and earn himself the nickname the Teacup Poisoner. But before we begin, I'd like to do a quick recap of what we talked about in the previous 3 episodes.
Thank you, because it's been a wee while since we did the other.
Has.
So I would appreciate it. And, it'll have been a week since anybody listened to the last episode. So.
Yeah. Also, we have listeners here with us tonight.
Oh, we did. I was going to talk about that.
So they definitely wouldn't have heard the first 3.
They haven't heard the first 3. What a shit night. I mean, Andrea's come from down south to come and see us. And thank you very much for that. And the offer and invite always stands if you're in the Stirling area. In fact, even if you're not in the Stirling area, you can still come and see us. They've travelled for fucking miles for this, Al. It's stupid. And they've walked in on the night where we do the 4th part of a 4-part series.
Yeah.
What a shit night to come on, eh? But thank you very much for coming.
His early life was a litany of adverse childhood experiences, what psychologists now call ACEs. He suffered various physical traumas, including severe mastoiditis, which required surgery, and being knocked down by a car when he was 8 years old on the North Circular Road, not far from Neasden, where he lived. His biological mother died very shortly after giving birth to him, and his family life during his important developmental years was also far from stable or standard. The dynamic of his family was frequently in flux as he spent his early years living with and being raised by his Aunt Winifred before his father Fred was able to bring the whole family back together under one roof. Fred himself was noted by many as not being an outwardly affectionate man, certainly towards his son, and some believe that he always blamed his son for the death of his first wife. When Fred remarried some years later, the boy's relationship with his stepmother Molly was turbulent and he often felt misunderstood. As the boy grew, it became obvious to our eyes looking back with the clarity of 2020 hindsight that due to some or all of his adverse childhood experiences, he didn't develop mentally along the same paths as other boys. He was incredibly intelligent for a child of that time, but also emotionally stunted, unable to empathize with anyone or anything on more than a very basic level. He began displaying worrying behaviors that today would have raised multiple red flags as to his mental health, but which at the time were overlooked or not understood to be the dangerous indicators that they were.
We've talked on occasion about the indicators. There's the McDonald triad, the bed wetting, the torture of animals, all that kind of stuff.
And he ticked all those boxes.
So I sorry to interrupt your roundup
Not at all.
to so far. Does he tick all the boxes? Like
All the boxes.
Yeah. So in 2024 hindsight, we can quite clearly say that he would have probably been picked up by some kind of social services or some point.
Absolutely would have.
But time frame being as it was, he was just allowed to be a normal boy.
Yeah. Exactly. But he developed a morbid obsession from a very young age with poisons and toxicology. This quickly went from reading books on famous poisoners such as Edward Pritchard and William Palmer to experimenting on animals. Before the boy was 12, his experiments had moved on to his classmates in school and his family. He tested various poisons on them in non-lethal doses and recorded the results with a cold dissociation. By 13 years old, his macabre obsession had left his father Fred with lifelong health problems and led him to deliberately deliver a fatal dose of thallium to his stepmother Molly. His activities were revealed in 1962 and he was charged with administering toxic substances to various people. The boy escaped being charged with his stepmother's murder because her body had been cremated and her ashes scattered.
And never tested for anything.
At his request as well, oddly enough.
Well, not that odd, really.
No, well.
But never tested because the circumstances weren't deemed suspicious enough to test.
Exactly. Following his trial, the boy was sentenced to the medical facility at Broadmoor in July of 1962 for a period of 15 years, or until such time as he was considered no longer a threat to society.
So should still be there.
Yeah. He spent 9 years as a patient in Broadmoor before finally being released in 1971, when his doctor thought he was, to use a poor and inadequate term, cured, and they declared him no longer a threat to others.
I remember having an issue with this a couple of episodes ago. I don't like cured.
No, but that's the term they used.
Yeah. I don't mind rehabilitated, but this is certainly...
He definitely wasn't rehabilitated.
No, it was not.
In the last episode, we covered his actions after his release. Unfortunately, his doctors at Broadmoor were sorely mistaken when they declared him effectively cured. He was, in fact, no different mentally to the day when he'd been admitted. His obsessions remained. He'd just gotten very good over the years at hiding it from the doctors.
So you don't think there's any level at all of remorse or rehabilitation?
No.
There's no resolve happened here at all?
No.
He's gone in at 100%. He's come out at 100%.
Yeah.
Punt right through.
Yeah. Well, mentally damaged person right through.
I'm sticking with it. But what... Sorry,
No, you're fine.
During his time in incarceration, he did a lot of reading and educating himself, and
As much as he could, but not much.
But he wasn't poisoning anybody during his...
Oh no, he poisoned at least 2 people while he was in Broadmoor.
Good. We'll move on.
Within 48 hours of his release, he had already slipped an unknown toxin into the wine he shared with one of the other residents in the rehabilitation house he was staying in. That was a man called Trevor Sparks. After this, he was assigned a job in a warehouse of John Hadland Limited in Bovingdon. That was the high-tech camera company.
Trevor Sparks sounds like a character from Mortal Kombat.
It does. But so began a repeat cycle, the same we saw when he was a child. Administering toxins and poisonous substances to those close to him and recording the results as they unfolded before him. As before, he started out with non-lethal doses, but quickly escalated to fatal levels. I believe that his main motivation was the power trip that he gained from playing God. When delivering poisons to people, he held the power to kill them or to let them live, depending on how large a dose he decided to give them.
It's 100% God syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, do you know what? The thing that really baffles me most is not the fact that he's committing these poisonings, and it's dozens and dozens and dozens by this point.
Yeah, it's dozens and dozens.
It's the recording of the meticulous recording of it is baffling to me.
I know. He would later become known as the Teacup Poisoner because he usually mixed his toxins in work with the tea that he prepared for his co-workers. He was so prolific and the sheer number of his victims so high that for months it was believed that there was a mystery virus responsible for the huge spate of sicknesses and deaths that had become occurring at John Hadland. It was called the Bovingdon Bug.
The Bovingdon Bug?
Yeah.
Sounds like a really cool, 1940s swing dance.
Yeah.
Have you done the Boddington Bud this weekend? Bud?
Bug.
That sounds like something you'd smoke.
The Bovingdon Bud.
No.
No?
We've had conversations about your accents before.
So we have.
We're gonna get I don't know, blacklisted.
In Jamaica.
No, don't do it.
Sorry. Okay.
Deplatformed was the word I was looking for there.
Taken off. Now, one of the reasons that it took doctors and the authorities so long to recognize what was going on was that the man's choice of an unusual and at the time almost unknown poison, thallium.
Yeah, it's not your general one. I know we've said this in the other episodes, but if you'd said, I'm doing a poisoner, I would have literally assumed strychnine, arsenic, possibly a few others, but literally strychnine and arsenic are the two that we have
the most experience of.
It's the most prolific amount of reading I've ever done is about those kinds of levels of poison.
Yeah.
You've done more, obviously, poisoning cases than I have. But thallium's not a normal.
No, it's not. Thallium is a heavy metal poison, and its progression isn't standard or typical in every case, although there are some symptoms that you will always see, such as hair loss. However, in a single very high dose, death occurs before some of those symptoms actually become apparent, which makes high-dose thallium poisoning very hard to diagnose.
Does it go away quick as well?
It's out the body fairly quickly, yeah.
I was going to say, for postmortem and autopsy purposes.
Yeah. But if you die with a high dose in you, it's still going to be there for postmortems or autopsies.
You'd also have to be looking for it. It's not something that would come up specifically in an autopsy or anything.
No.
That's a a designed test.
Absolutely, yeah. It wouldn't come up on a standard toxicology report of like 1970. Now, the first to die at John Hadland's by the hand of this disturbed man was his direct superior, Bob Eggle. As the weeks passed, more and more people fell ill as they unknowingly ingested non-lethal doses of poisons in their tea. The next to die was Fred Biggs. However, people were once again becoming suspicious, as the man's often strange behaviour repeatedly made them think twice about whether it was possible that the so-called Bovingdon bug could in fact be something far more sinister.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert, it was.
It certainly was.
The straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, came when an independent doctor was brought into Hadland's to talk to the workers about Fred Biggs' death. Here, the man who had poisoned him actually spoke up and himself suggested thallium as a possible cause.
It's a really random call to make.
It seems almost crazy, but it's probably a consequence of the man on some level wanting to be found out, while at the same time believing himself so clever that once people knew, they wouldn't be able to actually prove it.
So that's part of that God syndrome again, like going back to I hold the power in this moment.
Yeah. And he could never resist an opportunity to display his own, in his mind, superior intelligence either. His ego trips him up time and time again.
I know some people like that, Al. Definitely aren't two of them on this podcast.
No. Yeah, we do have to remember that he was of above average intelligence. And also he
like
held
the two on this podcast.
Yeah, but he held his fellow men and women in a level of sort of intellectual contempt. We don't.
Not like the people in this podcast.
He'd also always wanted to emulate the famous poisoners of history that he so idolized, and for that, he would have to be known.
So there's a level of why haven't they caught me yet?
Yeah.
Like, look at me, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
He's a fucking asshole, isn't he?
He is. So, as we pick up the story today, since his release from Broadmoor, the man has poisoned dozens of people at his workplace of John Hadland Limited. 2 people, Fred Biggs and Bob Eggle, are already dead from thallium poisoning. Others, like David Tilson and Jethro Batt, are hospitalized and in critical condition. The man responsible has just firmly raised suspicions against himself by displaying an unusually high level of knowledge about poisons and specifically the possible toxin used in poisoning most of the victims. So the 2 doctors, Anderson and Hind, who'd been interviewing the staff at Hadland's, were both now very suspicious of this odd man, who seemed to know too much about very specific areas of medicine, such as toxicology. Following up on their suspicions, Dr. Hind decided to phone the factory and speak to the man directly and try to gain a little more information about him before he started throwing allegations around.
Right. So did he know who it was then?
No.
No, but he knew there was something not right about this.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a suspicion specifically.
No, he did.
About
the suspect.
Oh, about the suspect. I was going to say about the untimely nature of the death. But
Yeah.
About the suspect as well.
About the suspect as well. No one had considered, well, that's not true. Thallium poisoning was considered as a possible cause because Hadland's did use thallium in the manufacture of their camera lenses.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it would have been accessible because of the nature of
Exactly.
the industry. Right, yeah.
But our suspect gained all of his thallium from chemists through direct purchases.
As we've talked about in the previous episodes, he almost had a relationship with some chemists where he was able to buy stuff that he probably shouldn't have had.
Oh, he definitely shouldn't have been.
In the quantities, certainly, that he had.
Yeah.
But in this case, a lemony snicket, a series of unfortunate events that chemical is used in the industry that he was working in was what raised the suspicion. However, it had fuck all to do with it.
Yeah.
It's mad, isn't it?
It is. So following up on his suspicions, Dr. Hind decided to phone the factory and speak to him directly. The thing he was most interested in was where the man had been institutionalized and for what reasons. Because it was no secret that he had been through a mental health facility. But after his release, it seems he was never required to disclose to his employers specifically where or why.
So he had to say he had been incarcerated
In a mental facility.
in a sorry, I thought you meant he didn't have to tell them. Like, he could have said, "No, I was in jail."
No.
But he had to tell them
He had to tell him he was in a mental facility,
but not specifically
but not
Broadmoor.
specifically which mental facility and not for what reason.
Well, it seems a massive failing on the recruitment process.
Yep. Neither had any of the police officers or his previous doctors seen fit to divulge this information at any time because he'd got the job through a prisoner rehabilitation scheme.
But he's still a nasty bastard.
Yep.
And you have to, like, you can't just employ somebody without knowing they're a nasty bastard.
They knew he was odd.
They knew he was odd.
Like,
Yeah, fucking that covers the two people in this podcast as well.
He
But
was
that's
definitely odd, but they didn't think he was poisoning everyone.
I suppose it's a stretch to think anybody's actually doing that.
It's a stretch to think anyone's that twisted.
Yeah, and quite blasé about it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody at the factory, though, actually knew that he'd spent 9 years at Broadmoor for mass poisoning.
It's mad.
If they had, they might have been more suspicious.
He might not have been there.
Yeah, so Dr. Hind phoned Hadlands, and he spoke to the man directly. After a short time spent on idle conversation, Dr. Hind asked the man the question that was probably most important and should have been asked well before now. He said, I understand that you were treated for your mental trouble by a Dr. Udwin. Would you mind telling me who he is and where you saw him? After a long minute of silence, the man replied, It's a long time since I've seen him. But Dr. Hind was unwilling to be deflected, and he pressed the issue, saying, But where did you see him? Which mental hospital? After another long pause, the man replied in a resigned tone of voice, You must know.
You've put two and two together already.
Yeah. But Dr. Hind said, It's very important that I speak to him. It's very important that I know from him the nature of your mental illness. So the man said, Wait until I close the door. There are people outside. And then after carefully closing the door, he said, Broadmoor. I was in Broadmoor. I've given you this information because you say it was necessary.
It was.
Yeah, it was. But this is the first time that anybody who hadn't known the man when he was committed in his early offences was told where he'd been treated for his mental illness.
Oh, so I suppose you could argue he's had a moment there. Has he had a moment of admission? No, I was going to say a moment of clarity, but that's fucking...
Nah, he's not.
No, just not.
Just not.
He still doesn't give a fuck at all. He just thinks it's another part to his... It's like another wee feather in his wing or whatever, you know. It's just, yeah, I was there.
Yeah, he's still playing games.
Really don't like him.
Dr. Hind was surprised, to say the least, and he reassured the man that this information would be treated in the terms of patient-doctor confidentiality. Nonetheless, the man must have had some inkling that he was on the cusp of having his recent criminal activities and the fact that he was already responsible for the deaths of 2 people uncovered. The fear of discovery, though, assuming he felt any, did not alter his behaviour at all. He went home as normal at 5 p.m, and that evening when he visited his sister Winifred, he made no mention of the conversation with Dr. Hind or of Fred Bigg's death to her or her family. To an outside observer, he seemed unconcerned. Perhaps he even believed that his terrible actions might still go undiscovered, or that if they were, they would be unprovable.
There's something in that there, isn't there? The fact that he's leaving out enough detail to not like pin himself on the moment. Like, you know, he's telling people about stuff that's happening, but not the bits that incriminate him at all. But yet he's still the man that's coming forward to say, have you looked at this?
Yeah, exactly.
There's something really...
He's almost like a Batman villain.
Fuck it, I wasn't going to give him that much dues. I was just going to say... I was probably going to say he was a cunt again, but we'll go on.
Now, the 2 doctors weren't the only people who'd been made suspicious by the odd questions that they'd heard during their time at Hadlands. John Hadland himself, as well as Gregory Fisher, who ran the factory day to day, had also been at the meeting, where the man himself had raised the possibility of and showed intimate knowledge of thallium poisoning. Both the doctors had also separately raised their concerns about the man with John Hadland. So that same day, the same day that Dr. Hind spoke to the man on the phone, both those men were taken to a private room in Hemel Hempstead Police Station, where they told Detective Chief Inspector John Kirkpatrick and Detective Sergeant Robert Livingston everything that they knew about the man and about the strange spate of sometimes fatal illnesses that had been going on now for as long as he had worked at the factory.
It's funny. This dude came out of jail, and then everybody started falling ill.
Yep.
So I can't put my finger on what it is though. Yeah, I know we can look at it
With 2020 hindsight.
and looking at the books and reading the tales and all that kind of stuff, but it just feels like,
Mental.
yeah,
I know. DCI Kirkpatrick went back that very night to the factory with John Hadland to examine the employment records and the accounts of the unexplained illnesses. It was clear that the so-called Bovingdon bug had begun very shortly after the man had started work there, and that those most affected were people who were in regular contact with him. The next day, he made a call to his superior, Detective Chief Superintendent Ronald Harvey, to explain the full details of what had been going on at the Hadlands factory.
I don't feel like I've said this yet, but it's a good list of names so far,
Yeah,
Al.
strong names.
I'm enjoying strong names tonight.
By an astonishing stroke of serendipity, Superintendent Ronald Harvey was at that moment attending a luncheon in London alongside some of the most notable forensic scientists of the time.
Are you lunching in London?
A luncheon in London.
Luncheon with forensic scientists.
Yeah, as you do.
I mean,
when you're a chief superintendent.
Yeah. We've had luncheon with a forensic psychologist.
We have.
I mean, it was Shahom. Does that count?
And it was a cheese board, but
it was a cheese board.
I'm taking it.
I'm taking it too.
Superintendent Harvey went back to his table after taking the call, and he related all the information he'd just been given, including the symptoms of the mystery illness, to the two men who were sat on either side of him. One of these was Keith Mant, an eminent forensic pathologist and a student of the famous Sir Keith Simpson, and the other was Ian Holden, who was the former director of the Aldermaston Forensic Laboratory.
What's that?
It's one of the seminal and first forensic laboratories in the UK.
And they're like the OGs of forensic pathology.
Yeah.
I don't know about it, but I would like to.
We could do a special.
Yeah, I'm keen.
I'll look into it. Love it.
You look into it. I'll have a read as well. We'll see if we can find some silly things that have happened there. Silly wasn't the word I meant to use there, but we'll carry on.
Now, Harvey couldn't later recall which of these two scientists had spoken up first, but one of them immediately remarked, "Well, it looks like you've got a case of thallium poisoning on your hands."
Jovially.
Yep, jovially. Both pathologists recommended that the superintendent obtain a copy of J.J. Patrick's book titled Thallium Poisoning, as this was the only book that covered the symptoms and the progression of this unusual toxin.
Have you had a peruse?
I've not.
You know,
it's an expensive book.
Oh, is it? Okay,
It's a big, expensive book.
If you'd like to join Patreon, never mind, carry on.
Anyway, at this time, actually, there were only 3 copies of this book in the entire country.
You can't have one of them.
I know. One held in a private collection by a professor who couldn't be contacted. One held by the Royal Society of Medicine's library, who never lent books out, even to the police.
That's a weird caveat.
Well, they always brought them back with like folded pages and tea stains on the pages.
Motherfuckers.
Yeah, exactly. And one in the police forensics library in Cheshire. And this last copy was within the hour being brought in a police car down the country so that it could be used in the investigation.
Did they blue light it?
They blue lit it down the country.
Emo.
Yeah.
Nice.
VIP treatment.
For the book.
Just the book in the back.
Like the, what's it? The Necronomicon. I can't say that word. In Evil Dead.
Yeah.
It's that special.
That's special.
Necronomicon? No, go on.
The Necronomicon.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, officers had also returned to the Hadlands factory and collected more evidence, such as mugs and tins, which the suspect was known to have used. They also took their own water samples to confirm previous tests, which had proved the supply free of toxins. DCI.
Like a benchmark moment.
Yeah.
Like they would go, these didn't have.
Eliminate everything else.
Test against this.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes
It's good science.
Yeah, good. I was going to say that. What was the place? The forensic science. They nailed it.
Yeah. DCI Kirkpatrick received less than satisfactory results initially from Scotland Yard when they called back, and they told him they had no information regarding the man that he had inquired about. However, he persevered and insisted that they check their records again, since he knew that his suspect had been treated in Broadmoor and that Scotland Yard would have been given some information on his release.
Yeah, they must hold, like, there must be a record that says this guy's been released.
Absolutely. After a short period of time, Scotland Yard phoned back.
Actually, we've just found something you might want to know.
That's exactly what they said. And they found the file that said that he had been released from Broadmoor 6 months ago after serving 9 years at the facility for poisoning his family and school friends.
Don't know how to tell you this, but we've just found a file. He was in Broad. You're right. He was in Broadmoor.
You're right, Kirkpatrick. Yeah, we're sorry.
And is there a lot of people? There's a lot of people
A
ill.
lot of people, yep. Oh.
Yeah, he's a poisoner. Fuck, we should have told you that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, could have used that information.
Sorry.
I know. With this new evidence of the suspect's past crimes, a warrant was issued for his arrest on Saturday, 20th November, 1971. Officers went to his living address, which was still the boarding house at 29 Maynard Road. The landlord, Mr. Sadiq, informed them that he'd gone for the weekend. This was true, as other officers were told the same thing by his sister Winifred when they called at her house. He was, in fact, visiting his father and aunt in Sheerness.
I don't know what that is. I don't know why you're looking at me.
Like, you should know.
Okay.
It's lovely.
I'll Google it.
The officers who visited Winifred only told her that they needed to talk to her brother concerning a disturbance at the Hadlands factory. However, she knew her brother well and remembered a day 10 years ago when officers had come to their family home while her father Fred was still hospitalized to ask the then 13-year-old boy some questions. And closing the door after speaking to the police, she must have been reeling and wondering if her brother was returning to his old ways and whether he'd ever actually changed at all. Winifred herself had been a victim of her brother's back then, and she had severe reservations when he had been released about whether or not he truly was cured, as the doctors at Broadmoor had claimed. Now, detectives Rees and Marsh were the two officers who made the journey to Kent at about 11:30 p.m. and knocked on the door of Fred's house where the suspect, his son, was staying for the weekend. When Fred answered the door and two of the officers identified themselves, he felt a knot in the pit of his stomach. As a direct consequence, remember, of his son's poisoning 10 years earlier, Fred was left with lifelong health issues, and it had taken years for him to come to terms with what his son had done. Fred later stated, in an article in the Sunday Mirror, "When my son got the job at Hadlands, and we heard that later some of the people there were being struck down by a mystery bug, it didn't click with me at first. Even when Mr. Eggle, the storeman, died, and he took over his job, and then when Mr. Biggs died, I tried not to face the ugly thought growing in my mind."
Yeah, I wondered there. I was gonna interrupt you, but I just let you finish that sentence because he must have known on a level that he knew what his son was capable of,
Oh, absolutely.
but not what he was. He didn't want to believe he was doing it again.
Yeah. However, as soon as Fred saw the two officers, he knew who they were and what they were there for immediately. He connected the dots in his head, so to speak. In the same Sunday Mirror article, Fred continued, "I stood aside and pointed to the kitchen where he was making egg sandwiches for himself. I would not touch anything he had prepared. One of the policemen immediately strode through and clapped a pair of handcuffs on him, while the other officer began to read out some sort of charge. I couldn't take it all in. I felt numb, crushed."
Yeah, you would imagine that in that moment, like, we know what a policeman says to you, but like, I can imagine just being totally out of the moment
Yeah.
and not taking in what was going on around you.
Yeah. After briefly and futilely protesting his innocence, the suspect was taken away. As I mentioned, it had taken Fred a long time to come to terms with his son's actions 10 years ago. And although he said many times that he'd moved on, it's actually clear from his statement that he wouldn't touch any food prepared by his son, that he never really trusted him again. And who could blame him, actually?
Not me.
No, exactly. Again, this is from the same Sunday Mirror article. Fred recounts his actions after the police car, which had his son in the back seat, drove off down the road. He said, "I walked slowly upstairs to my bedroom, took out every photograph, tiny snapshot, letter, and piece of paper that could remind me of him, even his birth certificate, and tore them into small pieces."
Like, I'm done with you. Get to fuck.
Yeah. And he was.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the man's put up with a lot.
Yeah. His son poisoned him and gave him lifelong health problems.
I mean, even if you look before that, like, he's lost his wife, not because of a birth, but, you know, very quickly after a birth.
Yeah.
And the man's brought up, he's brought him up by himself.
Yeah, with a stepmother.
With a stepmother.
Who his son poisoned.
Yeah, there's so many shitty bits to this, isn't there?
There is. And while this was going on, back at 29 Maynard Road, Detective Sergeant Robert Livingston was documenting and removing everything that the suspect had in his room. We're not going to go through the full list because it's 5 pages, but the pertinent evidence was over 20 separate containers of various toxins, some unidentified, but which included thallium, lead acetate, and antimony.
Antimony was the one I was trying to think of earlier when we've talked about them. Arsenic, strychnine, and antimony is
Yeah.
the ones, yeah.
There were also numerous containers of various acids used in preparing or refining poisons, as well as the equipment for the processes. A number of glass bottles of ether, some full, some partially emptied, which show that the suspect had again started inhaling the substance for its narcotic effect.
Are we picturing like a proper chemistry lab here?
Yeah.
Like stuff bubbling in beakers and...
Not literally bubbling, because
But
you wouldn't
like-
have had Bunsen burners.
No, but for the...
But jars of acids arranged on all the surfaces.
like a proper like mad scientist's lair.
Yeah. There were also various incriminating books, including an aid to forensic medicine, a dictionary of treatments, and an aid to forensic science.
He was doing his research.
Yep. There were also numerous books on macabre and dark subjects, such as witchcraft, Nazism, war, and death.
All bad things.
Bad books.
Bad books.
Bad books.
Do you want a list? I've got a bad bastards list. Do you
I
want
have a bad book list.
You want a bad book list? Yeah. Okay, we can do that, man.
Mein Kampf is in there.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story about Mein Kampf after the podcast.
Okay. Most importantly, Livingston found the diary in which the suspect documented his poisoning experiments and his plans. We read some excerpts from this diary in our last episode. People in the diary were referred to by an alphabetic code, but it was easy in most cases to deduce who the suspect was writing about just from the context.
It wasn't an encipherable code.
No, not by any stretch of the imagination. Fred Biggs' code was FB.
Take me a while.
Yeah.
I've read some of your scripts. It might take me a while.
When I did a couple of handwritten ones at the very start. That was ace.
I'm out.
Even I didn't know what I'd written.
Literally nearly that was the end of the podcast.
The suspect himself had been taken to Sheerness Police Station, where Detective Chief Inspector Kirkpatrick would soon collect him and bring him to the station in Hemel Hempstead. Once questioning began, led by Superintendent Harvey, it went slowly, with the subject being evasive and often simply refusing to answer. The diary of his crimes that he kept was shown to him, and he claimed that it was nothing more than notations that he'd been writing down for a work of fiction that he'd always meant to write. David Tilson had been discharged from hospital after his condition improved, but Jeff Batt was still critical. And as such, initial questioning was focused on trying to discover from the suspect what toxin he'd been poisoned with and what the dose had been.
Trying to relate it in some way to past poisonings or just to know?
Just to know.
Right.
In the afternoon of the following Sunday, the suspect finally relented somewhat while talking with DCI Kirkpatrick. Now, I think that what he does say was motivated by his ego and his need to display his, in his mind at least, superior intelligence rather than by any genuine concern for Jeff Batt's health. But regardless of his reasoning, at about 3:45 p.m., DCI Kirkpatrick said, "I've heard that Jeff Batt's condition is deteriorating. He's had hallucinations and appears to be suffering mentally." The suspect replied, "Well, that concerns me, Inspector, because it's obvious that the doctors aren't treating him properly. I'm anxious that Jeff should be properly treated, and I'll tell you what to tell the hospital. Although I won't tell you the agent I used. They must treat him with dimercaprol potassium chloride."
Is this another complex moment?
Yeah, it is.
It's absolutely him owning the I know more than you.
Yeah, 100%. Now, unbeknownst to the suspect, Jeff Batts was actually already being treated with dimercaprol potassium chloride, and he had begun responding to it. It's the standard treatment for many heavy metal poisonings like mercury, lead, gold, and also thallium.
So I'm not going to pretend I know anything about that. But is that like just an inherent substance that would suck up those metals?
It would bind itself to the heavy metal poisons
And
in
take it out
the
and flush
gut
it out.
and flush them out.
Right, okay. I suppose that makes, like, it makes sense that they were using it without him saying to. If they were suspecting of something, you would be treating a man for heavy metals and every other option. They'd be treating for every option, but
But they did suspect heavy metals now.
because of previous.
Yeah. Now, it's clear that the suspect knew that the jig was up, so to speak. And in a moment, I'll read another excerpt from later in the same interview when he essentially confesses to his crime, although he would later recant his statement, claiming that it was made under duress. The suspect raises his head and looks at the chief inspector and says, "I'll tell you about the 2 deaths and about the sickness of the other 2. I cannot tell you the agent I used. The whole story is too terrible. You'll be too disgusted and amazed." Kirkpatrick replies, "Nothing you tell me will amaze me, but carry on. It's important that I know the details from you." The suspect continued, "Bob Eggle, wrongly diagnosed. Not acute infected polyneuritis. Certainly a neurosis. But you and obviously the doctors think the deaths are connected, but for the wrong reasons. The agent I used, I made up myself." "What was it?" he asked. "I can't tell you at this stage." "How did you introduce it?" "By pouring it into the tea." "When?" "At the breaks, sometimes in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon." Kirkpatrick asked, "Was the agent the same in all 4 cases?" And the suspect said, "Yes, well, at least for all practical purposes." "I don't know whether I should say, Inspector." Then he said, "Yes, it's over. The charade is over." Kirkpatrick asked, "You dissolved the powder first?" The suspect nodded. "How?" he asked. "Just by dissolving it in water." "Was the amount the same in all the cases?" "No, it certainly wasn't. I gave Bob 1 very large dose of the powder." "How?" "Always the same at tea break. I simply poured it into the tea." "And the others?" "David Tilson and Jeff Batt, 2 smaller doses of the liquid. Fred Biggs, 3 fair amounts of the powder." Kirkpatrick said, "I obviously want you to explain everything in greater detail. Do you wish to make a written statement?" And the suspect said, "No, I don't think so at this stage. I'm not prepared to commit anything to paper. I may retract all I've said." And he did.
And he did. It's the best ending to any reading I've ever heard. Thanks for that, Al. A lot going on in that like last minute and a half. So he was admitting to it, but not in its entirety.
Yeah. He was admitting to poisoning a few of the people he poisoned, but he also wasn't going to sign any statement because he was going to recant everything he was saying.
Yeah. No matter what I'm telling you right now, I'm going to fucking deny it.
Exactly. And you have to remember as well, the suspect could rarely resist the temptation to display his own perceived intellectual superiority. It can be seen in the excerpts we've just heard, and it can be seen when he spoke up during the Hadlands factory meeting when he himself suggested thallium poisoning as a possible cause. I'd also like to read 2 short quotes from a later interview with Detective Superintendent Harvey, which shows the incredible scope of the suspect's ego, and I think speaks towards the motive for why he felt compelled to do these things.
Well, that's interesting because I don't think we've touched on at all any motive really through the past 3 and a bit episodes.
Not really.
I'm interested. Like, I'm really interested in hearing why you've sort of selected these quotes, because I was going to ask you at the end, like, what's your thoughts on motive? Because you've not let much out of Ali on this case.
There's too much story.
Too much story.
But you're right.
Hit me with your quotes, and then I'll come back to you.
Detective Superintendent Harvey states, "You've admitted giving poison to Bob Eggle and Fred Biggs. Their symptoms before they died indicate they died of poison. That is murder. You've also given poison to several other people, 6 that we know of. That may be attempted murder." The suspect replies in an offhand and dismissive tone, "That's an academic point. I could have killed them if I'd wished, as I did with Biggs and Eggle, but I allowed them to live."
Is this something he's going to recant again?
Yes.
Right.
Later in the same interview, Detective Superintendent Harvey asks the suspect what his motive was for poisoning all these people. Again, with a dismissive tone, he replies, "I suppose I'd ceased to see them as people, or more correctly, a part of me had. They became guinea pigs."
A massive amount of removal from humanity there, isn't there?
It is, but it also feels like almost a juxtaposition. His sense of superiority which necessitates that he play God and have the power of life and death over his fellow men and women, mixes with a level of dissociation which allows him to see those same people as little more than, as he himself states, guinea pigs.
They were experiments to him.
Yeah.
They were for his notes almost. Like, without going back to that point that I made earlier, that the bit that sticks with me most about him is the incessant need for keeping a record of what happened.
Meticulous.
And the people almost become superfluous to the actual notes. Like, he's looking for data and removing the humanity.
Yeah. They're subjects, they're not people.
It's really fucking horrible.
It is. While the suspect was being questioned, the investigation and the search for hard evidence against him continued. Fred Biggs' body was examined by senior lecturer in forensic medicine, Professor Hugh Molesworth Johnson.
You've nailed it.
With the names.
It's the best name we've ever used.
Professor Hugh Molesworth Johnson.
Molesworth Johnson. Professor Molesworth Johnson.
Yep.
I'd listen to anything he had to tell me.
Oh, if he had a podcast.
He'd do better than us.
Yeah, he would. He was assisted by Professor John Kavanagh, a neuropathologist. Initial findings at the autopsy could not confirm the presence of thallium, so the cause of death couldn't be established at that time. However, samples of Fred Biggs' organs were sent to Nigel Fuller at the Metropolitan Police Forensic Science Laboratory for further testing.
Further testing. You're leading us on to the next page.
Yes, I am. Although the cause of death couldn't be confirmed, it was established that the nerve degeneration, along with other neuropathological changes, were consistent with the effects of thallium poisoning. This was enough, at least to charge the suspect with Fred Biggs' murder, while further evidence was gathered. So late in the evening on the 22nd of November, Detective Superintendent Harvey spoke to the suspect and told him his initial charge was that you did, on or about the 19th of November 1971, at Bovingdon, in the county of Herefordshire, murder Frederick Ernest William Biggs against the peace.
I don't think we've heard against the peace before.
No, I know. It's a good term, though. I like it.
Yeah, I like it.
A few days later, on the 27th of November, Bob Eggle's ashes were exhumed from the graveyard of St. Mary's Churchyard. The ashes were also sent to Nigel Fuller for testing, along with the ashes from another cremated body to be used as a control and comparison sample.
Okay, they're doing proper science. Like,
They are.
I do appreciate this part of the podcast that we've been talking about over, so what, this is episode 4. The actual science that's been done alongside policing is it's quite good, man. I like it.
Once the police cottoned on, everything they did was right.
We've talked about good policing as one of my go-tos when I'm finding a story to tell. The Junan Devani case, not something I'd ever have told if it hadn't been for good policing.
Yeah.
The Humbug poisoner, good policing, immediate policing.
Very good policing.
That was immediate policing. And we've talked about, we've talked about cases where the policing has been on the cusp of shocking.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's something about when you know the society that's built around a police, what do we police by consent? And, and when they get it right, really enjoy it, man.
It's good, isn't it?
It is. And I'm enjoying this. Carry on. Sorry.
Nigel Fuller discovered high levels of thallium in Bob Eggle's ashes, and also actually in a sample of his kidney, which, due to the unusual circumstances and the symptoms of his death, St. Albans Hospital had preserved and kept. The levels found were between 2.5 and 5 micrograms per gram, which is more than a fatal dose.
Do we know where a fatal dose would be?
1 per gram, 1 microgram per gram.
Oh, yeah, so we're way above that.
Way above.
Okay.
So, in a landmark case for forensics and for the criminal justice system, for the first time ever, a suspect was charged with murder after their victim's ashes were exhumed and scientifically tested.
I love a first. Well done, Alistair. Thank you for that.
The samples of Fred Biggs' organs showed even higher levels of thallium, 20 micrograms per gram in his kidney and 120 micrograms per gram in his gut.
Oh, so he'd been
Really, really poisoned.
If you're going on levels of poison, you've got a tickle, you've got a poison, and on top of it, he's been top trumped.
Yeah, that's almost 120 times what you need to kill someone.
You'd win at Top Trumps for that, for definite.
By the 22nd of November, police had gathered enough evidence to charge the suspect with the murder by deliberate poisoning of Robert Edward Eggle, and also Frederick Ernest William Biggs, obviously. The attempted murders by deliberate poisoning of Jethro Walter Batt and David John Price Tilson, and the administering of poison to Ronald Hewitt, Peter Buck, Diana Smart, and Trevor John Sparks. Quite a litany of charges.
We're gonna get you.
It's less than a quarter of the people he probably poisoned, though. But he was committed for trial at the Hemel Hempstead Magistrates Court on the 22nd of March, 1972. One reason for the lengthy remand in custody before trial is that he was being examined by doctors to determine whether he was actually fit for trial and mentally sound.
I mean, based on literally all I know of this case is what you've told me in the past 1,000 hours we've been talking about it. He's 100% okay to stand trial.
Oh, yeah.
He isn't.
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he was at full capacity.
He knew it was wrong. He was at full capacity. He just didn't care.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Another reason for the long remand, actually, was that the suspect was intending to plead not guilty to all charges, and it proved very difficult to find a barrister who was willing to defend him.
Such is the legal system that you still need somebody to stand there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The trial began on the 19th of June, 1972 at St. Albans Crown Court. It was presided over by Judge Justice Evely, an ex-army officer who still brought his black cap to every trial.
Yes. Ish.
I can't decide.
I mean, I don't mind that he's got it in his back pocket because he can't use it.
Yeah, he can't use it.
But he can squeeze it in his back pocket when he wants to.
Yeah, like a stress ball.
Like a stress death cap.
Nice. Now, the prosecution was led by John Leonard QC, and the barrister finally found to lead the defense was Arthur Irvin QC.
I was gonna say, do you think he went on to have a illustrious career? But if he was the one
He didn't.
he found, I'm not pulling Billy Big Balls on this guy.
He didn't. I did look them up. They're nothing exciting.
They're nothing, and then exciting. Good.
Yeah. Now, the prosecution called more than 40 witnesses to the stand, and the trial would last 10 days, so we won't go into too much detail. It was decided that the evidence of the suspect's previous crimes and conviction would not be admissible.
That's not what he's been tried for. I'm all right with that.
It might prejudice the jury to his guilt of the crimes that had actually been charged with. Everyone who had survived being poisoned by the suspect at Hadlands gave testimony. Bob Eggles and Fred Biggs' widows testified. Nigel Fuller testified, and the forensic evidence proving that Bob Eggle and Fred Biggs both died from thallium poison was presented. The suspect's diary that he kept documenting his crimes was meticulously read out in full to the jury.
I was going to say that, like, by the time you get to the court case here, he's literally damned himself.
Oh, yeah.
By keeping that level of experimental detail, giving it the name he'd might have given it rather than we'd call it fucking nonsense, you're going to get fucked for this. He's literally written his own prison card.
Yeah, he's documented everything he's done. Everything.
And then but this is the interesting thing though, is kept it.
Yep.
And the kept it's the bit that, like, not that I don't mind that he's keeping details of his poisonings and his experiments on human beings, but the ability to then just distance yourself from the fact that that is 100% what's going to fuck you and not get rid of it and keep it forever. It's just, I can't comprehend that level of disdain for the system almost.
Yeah. It's the superiority complex times 20.
Oh yeah, we're going above God complex here. He's Big Bang complex.
It's true. DCI Kirkpatrick and Detective Superintendent Hayes both testified to the suspect's confession during questioning, even though the suspect later claimed that his statements were false and he'd never actually signed them.
This is the bit you were talking about. He's literally going, nah.
Yeah. The contents of his bedsit at 29 Main Yard Road were submitted. These included enough poison to kill dozens and dozens of people, including large amounts of thallium. His unusual knowledge of poisons and toxicology was testified to by the doctors who had questioned him at Hadland's factory.
So they did a good level of, sorry, what am I trying to say here? So they did a good level of collecting of knowledge. Like they went around and went, did this guy feel like he was like he was doing it deliberately?
Yes.
And speaking to co-workers and stuff like that, like it's not like Maggie was always sick.
No.
It was why was Maggie off that? I know Maggie wasn't one of them. I'm just as an example.
Diane was.
Diane. We'll go with Diane. Diane wasn't always sick.
No. Most of them were never sick.
But they were
Bob Eggle had never taken a sick day in his life in 40 years or something like that working at the factory.
And they were only sick, suspiciously, weeks after our perpetrator was released from Broadmoor.
Yes.
I mean, add it up yourself.
I know. With 2020 hindsight, though, we weren't there.
But the police are they're doing the right thing. They're bringing the right things to trial and looking at the moments that go, even though we have this incredible journal of crime, we still need people to stand up there and say this, this, and this.
You do. I mean, he has claimed on more than one occasion that the Journal of Crime is fiction.
The Journal of Crime is my favorite thing I've said in a while, by the way.
It's a good name.
Thanks, man.
Now, the case for the defense was that an obsession with poisons and even a veritable stockpile of poisons did not make someone guilty. Further, any confession he'd given was under duress and was false. And nobody had actually seen the suspect poison any tea at Hadland's factory. The evidence was, in the most part, circumstantial. Incredibly convincing. There was a swathe of it, but it was circumstantial.
Is it circumstantial when they write it down?
If the jury believed that it was a work of fiction.
I mean, it wasn't.
It wasn't, no, and the jury didn't believe that.
Okay, cool.
But Sir Arthur Irvine really did a good job of putting doubt into the jury. If not doubt about the suspect's guilt, then certainly doubt about the prosecution's ability to prove it beyond reasonable doubt.
And they are two very different questions.
They are. The suspect himself took the stand. How could his ego let him not have stood in front of so many people and display his intelligence?
Literally about to say, of course he did, because that's his moment.
Yeah, exactly. That's his moment in the limelight.
Yeah, totally.
He displayed to the jury his extensive knowledge of poisoning and poisons during cross-examination. And to be honest, his claim that the diary was a work of fiction seemed laughable when it corresponded exactly to real-life events and timelines.
It can only be fiction if it didn't happen?
Yes.
But all of this happened.
All of it.
And he wrote it down quite...
to the letter.
Specifically.
Yes.
That... I'm really glad you've already told me the jury didn't buy it, because I'd have been angry at them if you hadn't told me that point already.
The jury didn't buy it, but the suspect did come across to the jury as intelligent, well-spoken, quiet, and even witty at times. In one interaction with John Leonard for the prosecution, the suspect remarked, "Since when have poisoners been known for their lack of humour?" When John Leonard replied,
"Wait, what? Say that again."
"Since when have poisoners been known for their lack of humour?"
What are poisoners known for?
I don't know.
It's a fucking...
Poisoning people?
That's a redundant statement as far as I'm concerned.
Well, when Mr. Leonard replied, "I don't know, I've never met any," the suspect bowed his head and said, "Why, thank you, Mr. Leonard."
Right, so I think just to go back a couple of sentences there, I'm not surprised that the jury and the court found him an intelligent, well-spoken, presentable man. That does not surprise me by what you've told me about him. The notes he kept were meticulous, as you say.
Grammatically correct.
And an intelligent human being. However, I've never met a poisoner, per se, is like the biggest wank thing I've heard when that guy's clearly a poisoner in front of you.
Yes.
But I understand he's doing his job. But at the same time, you don't need to do that. I'm just sorry. I've got a wee bit riled about that, Al.
You rant away, Bob.
I won't, because you've got about 45 pages to go.
I don't. I've only got 2 pages to go. Really. When the trial concluded on the 29th of June, the jury took a full hour and 38 minutes to reach a conclusion.
Holy shit! I thought we were going to go for a record here. What have we done? 3 minutes, 4-minute juries.
We've done a 0.
We have done a 0.
Oh no! Wait a minute. Have we not? No. We're recording a 0 after this.
Look forward to that. But we have done a
Well, yeah, we've done like a 2-minute. They just walk out and come back.
sit down, make a cup of tea, and fucking. Are we? Why are we here?
Yeah.
That guy needs to go to jail. We've done them.
Yeah.
You're doing me a 0.
Yeah, I'm doing a 0 next to it.
I really enjoy this case you're telling me right now, but I'm quite excited about the next one.
Anyway, with the suspect's family watching on from the gallery, apart from his father Fred, who had finally completely disowned him, the suspect stood and waited for the verdict. When the foreman stood, he pronounced the suspect guilty of the murder of Bob Eggle and Fred Biggs, guilty of the attempted murder of Jethro Batt and David Tilson, guilty of poisoning Ronald Hewitt and Diana Smart. For the charges of poisoning Peter Buck and Trevor Sparks, it was deemed there was insufficient evidence to reach a definite conclusion.
I was really enjoying that list right to the last minute there, Al.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of guilties already.
Oh, there is a lot of guilties, but he was guilty of the rest of them.
Oh yeah, he was. Absolutely. 100%.
He's going to get a prison sentence, I presume, that justifies his cause at the time of
Yep, he does.
justifying him. That's not the right words, but you know what I
Bob
mean.
make words good.
Bob doesn't make. I'm really struggling with my words tonight, Al. For those of you that are continually listening, we've done a lot of redo moments.
Oh, more than ever, I think, tonight.
I'm not doing good with words.
Before Judge Evely sentenced the suspect, the court were made aware of his previous crimes.
As they should have been. This is the problem. These crimes could have stopped earlier.
They absolutely could have.
If his employer had been given the information at the right time, I would imagine the information the court are about to be given now.
Yes.
These crimes could have stopped and people's lives could have been saved.
Yes. When his previous crimes were read out, there was a noted intake of breath from the court and from the jury alike. Because they'd taken an hour and 38 minutes to deliberate over this.
Yeah.
That's an hour and 38 minutes where they were like, did he do it? Didn't he do it? And then they find out that he's killed his own stepmother before.
Yeah. If they'd had that knowledge, we're going on a 4 or 5 minute jury.
Yeah, they'd have been out and in.
Yeah. Cup of tea, wee nice biscuit, back in.
Yeah. Now, the foreman of the jury also stood up again before sentencing and asked to make a statement on the jury's behalf. Judge Evely, unsure of this break from normal court protocol, said, in the circumstances, that would be highly undesirable.
Undesirable.
Undesirable. But the foreman insisted.
Good.
And he told the court, the members of the jury in this case consider it to be our duty to draw the attention of the authorities concerned to the failings of the present system by which poisons are sold to the public. We urge that the system be reviewed in order that in future the public may be more consistently safeguarded.
This is fucking wonderful, Alistair.
It's an applaud from that jury right there.
I've got a huge amount of time. Do we know the foreman's name?
We don't.
We don't. That's a really sad moment. I wonder if we could find that out.
We can absolutely find that out.
I'd like to find that out and try and post about it.
I've seen the court documents. I just never thought to write it down.
Oh, good. Good. Thanks for that. 4 fucking episodes. Never mind. That's a wonderful moment.
It is. It's good, isn't it?
Because actually, that from what we 1972 to now, 50 years. Not a lifetime ago,
No.
but not a small amount of time ago. But what he said then is like literally what I would expect now.
Exactly.
And I hope that that's the moment that it changed.
Yes, it is. It's the moment it started to change. We'll get to that a bit later.
Cool.
Evely thanked the jury for their attention in this nasty case and then sentenced the suspect to 10 years for poisoning Diana Smart and Roland Hewitt and to 4 consecutive life sentences for Bob Eggle, Fred Biggs, David Tilson, and Jethro Batt.
The way you read that out really annoyed me. You know that.
I knew it would.
It really did. Got 10 years, and then I was about to jump on you, and then 4 consecutive life sentences. I'm back in the court. I'm back all right now. However, that was so English court 4 consecutive life sentences are life sentences.
They are.
So you would see your days out in a jail.
Yeah.
I'm not. We've talked about this a million times. Capital punishment is not something that's on my radar. I don't believe in it. 15, 20 years. What was it? 1954 was the last hanged person in the UK. Around about then, anyway. In his lifetime, people were being executed.
Yep.
He's a lucky man.
He was a very lucky man.
Choose your luck. But that he could have in his lifetime been hanged. Or executed, sorry. Would have been hanged.
Would have been hanged, yeah.
But like I say, I'm not a fan of capital punishment. I don't believe in it because you can get it wrong. However, we've always been believers in the top level of punishment for the time frame that it's handed out in.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm going to put it out there, 15 years too late.
It's true. But the man guilty of these awful crimes was sent to Pankhurst on the Isle of Wight, where he would die 13 years later on the 1st of August, 1990.
We were 8 years old when he died.
Yep.
So, like, we've said this, and you checked with me before we did this case. Is it all right to do it because it's in living memory? We don't generally touch it. However, 8 years. What were we doing when we were 8? Actually, we'd only met about a year before that.
Yeah. Year.
You were in the hills with the scouts. I was eating all your chocolate at your house.
I had hypothermia.
Yeah, something wrong with you, but I had a lovely time with your mum and dad.
Ace, thanks.
First time I ever met your sister and your dog. It was a lovely day. And then you came home like slightly blue and like whiny.
Yeah, with hypothermia, I'd been lost in the hills.
A wee bit whiny.
Thank you for calling that childhood trauma.
But that's literally like, that's the same, literally the same time period that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the 90s is like 30 odd years ago, which makes me also sad.
And old.
Not old, shut your mouth.
We're pretty old now.
We're middle-aged, and we're having a podcast breakdown.
That is true.
Currently. Sorry. So I just wanted to. So he'd been sentenced, indefinite, essentially.
Yeah. Thou shalt never get out.
As Jesus said, thou shalt never get out. And 13 years after being incarcerated, he died in 1990.
Yes.
I don't know. It's like I'm really struggling with being on board with this, if I'm honest.
Well, as a direct result of the case, complete reviews were done of the procedure for releasing criminal psychiatric patients.
Okay.
And significant changes were made.
Indulge me. To the point that I would guess that if you've been in somewhere like Broadmoor or another psychiatric hospital, which we don't call them that anymore,
no.
But your full disclosure would have to been given to a new employer.
Yes.
I think that's the most important thing we've taken away is specifically from this episode.
Yeah, they also brought in outside reviewing by another psychiatrist before
like an
patient was reviewed.
An at arm's length person.
Exactly.
So rather than an institutionalized psychologist, that mediation between release and work.
Yeah.
There has to be something in there now.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I know. And also more stringent requirements were made to the system by which people could obtain poisons. And the existing regulations were far more strongly enforced.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway from what you were saying earlier. Like, the ability to buy what is more than a rodent poison or a... Like, actually, I would imagine for you and I to buy strychnine, we can't.
No.
We can't buy arsenic in any form.
Or thallium.
Or thallium. Is this the change point?
Yeah, this is where it starts.
This is literally like, that's the change point now.
Yeah.
Good. Because I don't need it.
Me neither.
No. And only people who need it are bad bastards.
Or people who do need it.
I'm sure there's a reason, but
Yeah.
like, not your average Joe
No.
or John or James or George or Georgia. I don't know.
Why are they all J's?
I don't
What
know.
about Stephen?
You know he can have it.
Fair enough. Now, that's the end of his story. He poisoned dozens of people, including his own stepmother and co-workers, to satisfy his own ego. He cherished his own superiority while holding his fellow men and women in near contempt. But he wasn't some evil genius. He was obsessive in very particular fields, but no more than that. He suffered various adverse childhood experiences, and he was clearly disturbed and developmentally impaired from a young age, which went untreated for years. He was chilling in his dissociation and in his complete lack of empathy, but he was mentally ill. Was he evil? His crimes were evil. He committed them in full understanding of what he was doing. The British justice system deemed him fit to take responsibility for them. But I also believe that had he been born today, telltale signs of his mental illness would have been noticed and diagnosed in his childhood, and his life might play out quite differently. The reality, though, is that whether by nature or nurture, this man was made into a cold and calculating killer, an egotist who wanted to be one of the best known poisoners of all time. He wrote a note once which said, "Make me so famous that I wind up in the Chamber of Horrors at Madame Tussauds. I want to go down in history as a really famous murderer."
He wanted on the bad bastard list.
He wanted on the bad bastard list. Sadly, he got his wish, even down to the waxworks in Madame Tussauds, which was placed beside his idols Dr. Harvey Kripman and William Palmer.
I don't like that.
Well, it doesn't have to be the way he wished. Time changes everybody's legacy. After listening to these 4 episodes, I hope you remember the victims. Those who died, Molly Petley, Bob Eggle, and Fred Biggs, and those who suffered, David Tilson, Jethro Batt, Diane Smart, Ronald Hewitt, and the countless others. If you think about Graham Frederick Young, the man known as the Teacup Poisoner, at all, think of him as a mentally ill, severely disturbed individual who should be pitied for being born at a time when society was ill-equipped to help him and who did evil things. And that is the concluding part of the Teacup trilogy in 4 parts.
In 4 parts. I mean, thank you.
Oh my God, I went down such a hole in this one, Bob.
You did. We'll come back to that in a minute. I've got a couple of, I actually wrote some notes down while you were talking there, because it's not often that I do that. We just tend to do them at the time. The one thing is, I want to check in with Sarah that she's all right, because you said earlier that he was a man who read about poisoners.
Yeah.
And and became one.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is all I've done for the past
fucking ages. So are you all right?
I'm okay.
You're okay. And we're going to get off poisoners for a while.
Yeah.
Can we get on to other crimes for a while? I give you this buy. You don't have to talk about crime in your next episode.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. Twisted Britain cannot have crime in it just because of what's happened. I'm giving you this buy.
Oh.
The other thing I was going to say to you is, I don't think you've ever used the word evil before.
No.
I think,
and I don't think that he was evil.
I find it interesting because I mean, as a man who knows you for the best part of 4 decades or whatever it is, you don't. I was surprised when you used the word evil there, because it's not something that you would throw about quite easily.
It's not.
And I took a lot from you saying that, because it was clearly part of this rabbit hole that you've gone down. You've really taken away from it. And the fact that you've gone, 4 episodes, 73,000 hours or something like that, without saying his name, means a lot.
We said it once.
And we will never say it again.
And we will never say it again, because he wanted to be known as the world's most famous poisoner.
So he doesn't make my bad bastard list.
No,
because I don't want to write his name down.
exactly.
And we'll go from there. The other thing I wanted to pick you up on, just mildly, not something that you said, but you alluded to the fact that he wanted to be known,
He did.
but he also thought he was better than the police force. He thought he was above the rest. We've had a case like that in Scotland recently, and it's resulted in the second longest prison sentence ever handed out
Yeah.
to a human being. I'll not say his name because I had the displeasure of being in Glasgow High Court while he was being tried. The murder of Emma Caldwell is one of the cases that will stand in Scottish history for forever.
Yeah.
And what happened to the sex workers of the East End of Glasgow is just horrific. But the man who was given a 36-year sentence, and it is the second longest sentence ever given to a single perpetrator of a crime. So the only longer sentence was given to the World's End murders, and we'll also not ever say his name either. But the interesting thing about the Emma Caldwell case is the perpetrator in that case came forward and gave an interview to the BBC and sat in a room with one of today's most wonderful investigative journalists, a woman by the name of Sam Poling, and sat down with her and almost challenged her to find him guilty.
Yeah.
And gave her an open interview and walked out. This is 30 years after the fact. Excuse, it's not quite 30. Excuse my knowledge of the details there. But he literally came into a room and sat down with an investigative journalist, one of the best in the industry, and went, I can't believe they thought I was, and here's some details. And Sam went away and went, I've got you. I just need to get you.
Yeah.
And people like that get caught. And that was the point I was coming back to. So your man here who's got God complex that went, I can just give you a wee bit more and a wee bit more.
Yep. That show you how clever I am, how much more clever than you I am.
That desire for proving themselves better than somebody is what eventually has got them both caught.
Yep.
And I hate it because they think they're better than you. I love it because the court system finds them out and they get done. In both cases, they've been sentenced to the top of the law that was available at the time. And this is what both of us are adamant that we will believe in.
Yeah.
We don't believe in the death penalty, but we believe in the last sentence the law can give.
Yeah.
The last sentence, or the top sentence.
Yeah, the top sentence that you can get contemporarily.
And that's literally, I wrote that down during the middle because it just, it baffled me because when we were talking about it, I was like, that's exactly what happened in the Emma Caldwell case. And it's something that I'll not talk about, or we'll not talk about in the podcast until we're like 140, because then it's out of living memory. But it just, there's so much resonance in that I'm better than you mentality that really fucks me off.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's my mild rant.
That is a good rant.
Thank you very much for 4 episodes on that, Alistair.
4 episodes on that.
So answer me this, riddle me this.
Boy wonder.
Why this case for this many episodes?
Why this case for this many episodes? This case for this many episodes because much like the Jesse King episode, which I went on a little hold down near the start of when I started Twisted Britain, the psychology of the suspect interested me. I wanted to know what could make somebody do something that terrible.
So it's the humanity of it. It's the where is your brain space?
Yeah. I don't necessarily believe in, I do believe in evil people. I think there's far fewer evil people than we think out there. Most people and most crimes are committed by people who are driven to it in some way. We might not agree with what's brought them there. We might not agree with their reasons for doing it, but they're fathomable.
This is one of the first cases we've talked about in a while that I would say that doesn't end up in what we've cliched almost as it's all about money.
No.
This one was nothing about that.
Exactly.
This was all about, in fact, I don't even know what it was about. Was it about Information, was it about?
This was about information and power.
It was power. You're right. Absolutely.
Mostly power.
Yeah, it's that God complex that goes alongside it.
Yeah.
It's very rare that we've talked about, and I include the 50 odd episodes that Nadine and I did before you joined. It's very rare that we talk about something that is easily removable from. We did this for the inheritance. We did this because of this. It was a mad moment. You know, none of these were mad moments. None of these. This was a cold, calculated killer.
Yeah.
Experimenter turned killer.
Yeah, it's an experimenter who thought so little of his fellow man that he could just kill them.
So is that where the intrigue? I don't want to use the word interest, but is that where the intrigue falls with you? Is like, where's the brain space?
Yeah. Where's the brain space? Why did he do it? And what turned him into the kind of person that could do that?
So why did he do it?
He did it because he was developmentally challenged. He needed that power trip, that power over his fellow man as validation for his perceived intellectual superiority.
So if we remove the mental capabilities, because he was clearly a smart man.
He was clever in very specific fields. Toxicology and medicine, knew everything about it.
Social side,
zip. And things that weren't medical or toxicological, he wouldn't have known about. His knowledge of biology or physics was non-existent. It was just toxicology, forensics, medicine.
He'd have made a good cop.
Yeah.
Maybe researching it
or a good forensic scientist.
Maybe researching it a slightly different way. I tell you what, I'm not going to question it. What we might do. Maybe we'll do an episode where you and I, where I'll just ask you why this one and a few others.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly differences between the cases that you and I find when we're looking for cases.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll do an episode where we just ask each other why this one, why that one, or why that route, and we'll pop that out sometime. I don't want to take any more time because we've done 4 episodes on this and we're probably up at the 6-hour mark at this point, which, in fact, there you are. Thank you very much, Alistair. That was an absolute pleasure. And a drain on you, I can tell. You're probably quite happy to be finished on it.
Yeah, I am, actually.
We'll move on to something different next time.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story next time. How about that?
No, we're recording next time in like 2 minutes.
We're not, because it's 11 minutes past 11.
We'll manage it.
No, we won't. We'll have a drink and we'll have a chat with Andrea and her husband and we will just have a nice evening.
I reckon we could do it.
I've got nothing else. I think this isn't a case I don't think we need to stretch out on. I think we've said our bits and pieces.
We have.
If you enjoyed this, as always, you can find us on all the social media channels. Just look for Twisted Britain. In fact, Google it. You'll find us.
Yeah, we're there. X going to give it to you. Smash the like bar.
There we are. I don't really have anything else. I'm done.
No, thanks for listening to me for 4 episodes. Everyone who's stuck it through for the full 4. And thank you, love you, bye.
And thank you, Alistair, for doing that. And thank you, love you, bye.
Thank you, love you, bye. I can hear myself. Thank you, love you, bye.